There's a couple different ways to use them. A lot of traders use them to try and trade in between, buy when it hits the lower band, sell when it hits the higher band. That's one way to use them. Another way
Welcome back, traders and investors. We have Angie Maguire on the line. She's a vice president for Grain for Citizens Elevator, and she was listening in on our other interview and talking about the impact of the dollar on commodity prices. First of all, Angie, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm great. Thanks for having me back on.
All right, we talk a lot about the stock market and the dollar and interest rates and the Fed and everything, but well, just before we got on, you really made an interesting comment about the dollar's effect on commodity prices. So could you make some comments on that, please?
Yeah, well, one of the major sectors of demand in the commodity markets, of course, is the export market. So the stronger our dollar is, of course, the harder it is for our foreign buyers to buy, or at least it takes more of their money to buy ours because of the strong dollar. So that's been one of the reasons we've seen here as of late. The rallying dollar, of course, has put pressure on commodity prices because we have to try to make sure we're cheap in comparison to the global market. So that's really been something that we've been paying attention to and kind of trying to figure out where it's going to head as we move forward to get a good gauge on what's going to happen with foreign demand.
Okay, so let's just go right into some of the commodities, and let's start here with corn. And I know last time you were on, we were going into a crop report, and you wanted to, you were checking to see what the actual numbers were. What were the yields? It looks like we got a little bit of a rally here going in corn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the rally in corn is somewhat surprising, you could say, just because we have seen several increases or a couple increases in yield since the last time you and I had talked. The USDA is now almost in the mid-170s when it comes to overall yield projections for the corn crop. But the one question that we're looking at right now is what kind of harvested acreage we're going to see. And then, of course, you know how the market goes as you trade the same narrative over and over and over again. Big crops, big crops, big crops. Well, last Friday, the USDA came out with a supply and demand update and actually reduced the amount of harvested acres, which offset a bit of their increase in yield. So now there is some talk that perhaps we may have overdone some of the big crop estimates, or at the very least, we have a feeling that we're not going to see it get too much bigger. There's some outside talk that maybe you will, but in reality, I think most of the trade is kind of feeling comfortable with the numbers the USDA is projecting and looking at the outlook that 2 billion bushel is on the upside probably of what we're going to see for carry-out projections, at least at this point.
Now, I know you help farmers out a lot, with hedging, and I know you pay attention to some technical analysis here. Now, you got to move here in corn, and it looks like it's just bumping its head up against the 350 level. In fact, it looked like it had in the last 4 trading sessions after a prolonged, downturn in a bear market. I mean, will you use something like the 350? Taking all the other fundamentals that you have in in your wheelhouse, but then you get a breakout above 350 here. I mean, sometimes you just kind of say, okay, I'm going to take my fundamental analysis. I'm going to, because you don't have a crop report coming out for a little bit. I'm going to put that on the side, and I'm going to go with the technicals, or how do you mix the two?
We mix the two just I joke and call myself a backyard tech trader. Really I'm not. I'm more of a 350 is a round number. It's a psychological number.
Yep.
There's some talk on the moving averages. We're finally above that for the first time since May, where we finally actually seen the transition in the corn market to where we've had a sustained rally. And 350 would put us close to around a 10% gain in futures from the low. And like I said, I'm a backyard tech trader. I was like, 10%, that looks like a good first step. And if we can get to where we close above the 350, I do think, for one, we saw the funds come in and build a pretty substantial short position. They've started to come back in and buy a bit. The idea that the corn, the price or the value of the grain was cheap at 320 is come in and pushed us up. Now the big question will be is if we do close above 350, is that going to be a selling opportunity for some of the guys that came in and bought 30 cents ago, or are they going to double down and kind of continue from a trade perspective. And so, yeah, 350 at this point to me is somewhat of an important number if we can close above it. The same with the 960 in the November soys, and maintaining, above 5 and beef wheat are kind of the numbers that I'm looking at as a guide at this point.
Will you go on like one close? Do you need a couple closes? What are you trying from being a backyard tech trader?
Well, I like one close above 350 and then a sustained gain the next day. So basically, it needs to be a couple, I would say, above that in order for me to feel confident that we should take our next move higher. A close above 350 and then a subsequent sell-off, back to old recent lows or something of that nature would of course be troubling. Whereas if we see a close above 350 and then the next day, I would prefer a short, sustained 3 to 5 cents a day rally, something that's more sane than what we're seeing right now. I mean, the money that you're seeing flow back in is causing some pretty extreme moves in the market, and to me, that's concerning in and of itself because it's not a sustained long-term sort of nice flow build to a rally.
You mentioned a moving average there, and one of our traders thought he heard it as a 55-week moving average. Did you say 50 or 55?
No, 50 day, 50
day.
or 200 day, and that's
Okay.
just basically what other folks are talking about.
Okay. Now, you also said that you noticed about, some of the big funds had large short positions and that they were, taking it off, not necessarily, flipping to longs on it. But I used to follow the commitment of traders through Steve Breezy. Do you just do it by, eyeballing the volume in it, or do you have a way to track the commercials?
No, I mean, you can track the commercials. There's a lot of folks out there that do. I let others do the research for me on that side of things.
So is like the commitment of traders something that you look at, or is there? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Let's look at the beans here, and the beans are kind of similar technical formation. That actually looks like it's got a little bit of a leg up here, trying to break out above what's that, the 50-cent level there, or $5 level. What do you think about beans?
Beans right now I think the market for the farmer has presented themselves a pretty decent selling opportunity. Beans at this point in time, really when it comes down to it from a long-term standpoint, really shouldn't be the leader of this rally, which is what they have been, from an overall fundamental position. Now, we've had a couple bullish reports come out. We saw the quarterly stocks come out in the USDA. Reduced old crop carryout, so we saw that we were actually using more throughout the past crop year than what the USDA had given us, or at least what they were releasing throughout the bulk of the year. So we know demand's higher. And then there's some questions on production. Beans, when they're ready to be harvested, do struggle with heavy rainfall. There have been parts of Missouri that have been ready to harvest that have been dealing with, 5 inches plus of rain. So, you've seen some thought process that perhaps we could see some damage or quality issues develop that, and we've seen a slowness of new crop beans coming into the marketplace, and we actually had one of the tightest carryouts on record with old crop. So it's just a almost like a faulty vacuum in the pipeline right now that's pushing beans a little bit higher at this point, I would say.
Okay, so just overall on these, we did get a bump off the lows in, this complex here. So you just kind of have the wait and see approach here to see if it's actually just another bit of a dead cat bounce, or if we're going to get continued follow through to the upside.
Yeah, I mean, I would think we should see support. I think at the very least we'll have support in the marketplace. But to make a run towards 10 without anything changing from a major fundamental standpoint would be dicey to me at this point.
Okay, and any comments on wheat? One of our traders is saying it's trying to hold the 200-month SMA. Is that something that you'll go that far out to look at?
No, I don't go that far out to look at, but it really is struggling. Wheat has a global stocks number that we haven't seen in a long time. The U.S. is pretty tight on stocks, so there's a weird situation that's developing with the United States, the cash market, for milling quality wheat versus what's going on from a global standpoint. We're some of the more expensive wheat in the world market, so the demand's been slow on exports, but we've been anticipating slow exports. So there's kind of a tale of two cities with that, and so So futures right now may not be actually demonstrating what the cash market's doing.
Okay, just one final question for you, and I know we talked about the dollar, and we've talked about technicals and a lot of things, but there's other things going on in the market, with the Ebola scare and whatnot. I mean, it's really, is it something that you just try and like, okay, this is just part of the news, I'm just going to stick to my preferred methods of analysis, or, is that something that you kind of keep in the back of your mind, or how do you factor that into your, you're making some pretty important decisions or helping farmers make important decisions? Is that something you just kind of got to put out of your mind, or how does it factor in? No?
Well, you want to pay attention. I mean, you don't want to put it out of your mind because there's always the concern that you could run into a black swan event. Something of that nature, of course, would have an impact on population, which could possibly have an impact on food demand, production, etc. But when it comes down to it, it's something you watch out of your peripheral more so than anything. It's more of is it going to develop into a psychological push towards wanting to, outside money wanting to own something it can hold. And that's part of why sometimes commodities are a golden child in times when the outside market or there's outside concerns on things that are developing. So, when it comes down to it, at this point in time, we just kind of watch and make sure it doesn't blow itself out of proportion or get beyond our ability to handle it. But from an overall short-term perspective, we really don't see a big impact on it, outside of the fact that, like I said, we're seeing some money reallocation that's allowing the markets to firm here at this point.
Okay, and just finally, I know another big part of your analysis is the weather. Do you see any weather patterns that could upset the flow or the crop supply?
Well, right now we've been dealing with it. We've seen the rainfall slowing harvest, so that's where we've seen some support come from. At this point, it does look like it'll dry out. We should see grain move, but I would think that'd be an overall cash market scenario versus a futures market if we see the grain start to flow.
Okay, and just one final question here. Africa is a big producer of cocoa. I know that might be a little bit out of your wheelhouse. Do you follow cocoa futures at all?
No, I don't. Outside of the cost of chocolate at the grocery aisle, that's what it has been moving, but I don't follow it too close.
Okay, all right. We've had Angie Maguire on the line, and she's Vice President of Grain for Citizens Elevator, been working in the grain industry for the past 10 years. A frequent guest here on Benzinga's Pre-Market Prep, brought to you by Charles Schwab. Angie, thanks for coming on. Have a good day. We hope to talk to you again soon.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.